Hi everyone, welcome to the 2018 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard webinar. My name is Annie Gilio. I'm the Senior Manager for State Policy for ACEEE. Before our speakers begin, I'd like to note a few logistics. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode. Following our speakers' remarks, we will open the webinar up to questions, taking those from press first. Please type your question into the chat box if you would like to ask a question, and note if you're media. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to registrants after the webinar. Now we'll begin our presentation. For brief introductory remarks, here is Steve Nadell, the Executive Director of ACEEE.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the unveiling of the 12th annual ACEEE State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. At this point, as just about everybody knows, forward progress at the federal level has somewhat stalled on energy efficiency, but fortunately many states are stepping out, and we'll be discussing some of these in the next few minutes. I would note, for example, New Jersey is our most improved state, and they have new legislation and are thinking of joining RGGI. We have New York with some new goals, although they're still putting some meat on the bones on that. Virginia has some legislation also joining RGGI, and Massachusetts and California have also recently passed new legislation, but we'll be hearing about that from speakers from those two states shortly. So states are really taking the lead, even if Washington isn't. And with that, let me turn it back to Annie for the rest of our presentation.
Thanks, Steve. I'd like to now introduce Weston Berg, lead author of ACEEE's 2018 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard and Senior Research Analyst for our State Policy Program. Weston?
Yeah, thanks, Annie, and thanks, Steve, for those intro remarks. And also thank you to Commissioners Judson and McAllister for joining us today. This is Weston Berg, lead author of the scorecard, along with several others on our ACEEE team. First, just some background about ACEEE. We're a not-for-profit research group founded in 1980 with a focus on advancing energy efficiency policies, programs, and investment, with a lot of work, particularly in the industry, buildings, and transportation sector. I'm on our state policy team, but we also have teams working on local policy, federal policy, as well as utility efficiency policies. And we also publish, in addition to the state scorecard, a city energy efficiency scorecard that some folks might be familiar with that looks specifically at local level efforts, which will come out in the spring-summer time frame. So stand by for that in 2019. So this is the 12th edition of the scorecard, and today I'm happy to share the results of what's been a pretty dynamic year in energy efficiency. We've certainly seen some ups and downs, which we'll touch upon in the next few slides, but overall we've seen that states as a whole continue to report energy savings trending upwards as states and many utilities continue to embrace efficiency as a least cost way of meeting their energy needs and curbing pollution and emissions. So without further ado, this is the 2018 scorecard map, including all 50 states and DC, based on 6 policy areas we look at, as well as 32 scoring metrics, including utility savings, transportation, and building sector efficiency, as well as other state-led efforts. States in dark green are those that perform particularly well in the scorecard, while the lighter shaded states are those that we see as having the most opportunity to improve. Massachusetts emerged as the leader again for the 8th consecutive year, although it's been fairly neck and neck with California in recent years, with California narrowing the gap to come within a half a point of first this year. We'll hear more from those states in a second from Commissioner Judson and McAllister. We also saw a few other states show significant improvement, particularly New Jersey, which Steve mentioned, but also Missouri, Colorado, South Dakota, and Connecticut, and we'll get into each of those a bit more in the following slides. So first, some good news. Despite recent freezes on federal efficiency efforts this year, states largely continue to lead the charge on energy efficiency, with about half of states reporting an increase in electric savings, and spending overall on efficiency increasing to almost $8 billion last year, rising more than 4.5%. We also saw a net incremental savings increase to more than 27 million megawatt hours, enough to power 2.5 million homes, just from efficiency measures installed in 2017. And this really only tells part of the story. Measures installed in earlier years also continue to produce savings, meaning that cumulative annual savings were actually vastly higher. Some other key findings: New Jersey was our most improved state this year, rising to 18th place, thanks to a renewed commitment to clean energy investment, as well as to becoming the 27th state this year to adopt an energy efficiency resource standard. setting required savings targets for the state's utilities. With utilities now beginning to roll out plans to meet those targets, New Jersey is really setting the stage for additional breakout years in efficiency looking forward. The state is also in the midst of finalizing renewables and an emissions cap to allow it to rejoin the regional greenhouse gas emissions initiative, likely sometime in the 2020 timeframe. Iowa, on the other hand, took the biggest fall this year, passing legislation earlier in the year imposing a restrictive cap on efficiency spending that's expected to cut savings dramatically going forward. The state, once a Midwest leader in efficiency, fell in the standings from 19th to 24th, and will likely to continue to fall as programs are weakened. Vehicle emission standards were also in the headlines quite a bit this year, with the federal government seeking to freeze previously established fuel economy standards at 2020 levels. At the same time, California has stepped up to recommit to those original 2017 to 2025 standards, leading the way with 12 other states to also follow California standards. We also continue to see states strengthen efficiency in state-adopted building energy codes, including a growing movement toward net zero or zero net energy ready codes, which are growing more cost-effective. California's new 2019 building energy codes that take effect in 2020 being the most immediate example, which will require new construction to use solar PV aimed at zero net energy use in all new homes by 2020. Trying to get to this slide. So we also wanted to highlight our recent EERS map showing all states that have put in place long-term mandatory efficiency targets for utilities. Back when we first started the scorecard in 2007, there were 12 states with an energy efficiency resource standard for utilities. Today, we can see there are now 27. As you can see from the map, all the top 10 states have an EERS in place, typically a fairly stringent one. Last year, we highlighted Illinois for significantly raising their targets. This year, the notable addition is New Jersey, which announced plans to ramp up electric savings to 2% in the coming years. But we also saw a couple other states increase targets this year as well, such as Arkansas and Colorado, and also New York, which has set a really ambitious target of 3% of savings, 3% savings by 2025, and is currently working through the details regarding implementation through its ongoing reforming the energy vision grid transformation proceeding. So the next few slides provide just a quick breakout of the scorecard from a regional perspective. Touching briefly on the Midwest, it's a region where we've seen a lot of variation and several ups and downs. Last year, we highlighted Illinois, which has been working toward ramping up utility savings to meet new targets passed in 2016. We've also seen utilities in Michigan file plans this year to step up savings to meet higher targets that were established as well back in 2016. Missouri was a significantly improved state this year, rebounding from 2016 to report its highest level of utility savings in 2017. And Ameren, Missouri, the state's largest electric utility, issued big plans this year to increase the rollout of EV charging stations, as well as greatly increase investment in energy efficiency over the next 6 years. Although those plans remain under review at the Public Service Commission, so still very much up in the air. Moving on to the Northeast, most of the states, these states continue to perform really well in the scorecard, accounting for 6 of the top 10 states, including Massachusetts. The vast majority of these states, with a couple exceptions, have adopted mandatory savings for utilities and have approved policies aligning utility business models with efficiency. Earlier, we noted major efforts in New York and New Jersey, which we'll be keeping a close eye on moving forward. But other states have also been active on other fronts, including Connecticut and Pennsylvania, which each approved updates strengthening building energy codes to the 2015 IECC for both residential and commercial construction. Vermont, also a longtime leader, passed appliance standards legislation this year, setting standards for 16 products, expected to save consumers roughly $17 million a year. So for the Southeast, investment in efficiency has historically been a bit lower, with most states falling in the lower half of the scorecard. Florida and Texas continue to lead the region, both having been pretty active in regularly updating and strengthening building energy codes. Virginia also improved in the rankings, making news with a sweeping grid modernization bill earlier this year, calling for a tripling of energy efficiency budgets over the next 10 years, potentially signaling a new era for the state going forward. Like New Jersey, Virginia has also been working on drafting carbon trading regulations as well, with an eye towards joining RGGI. We also saw Arkansas, one of the two states in the region with an ERS, strengthen its utility savings targets for the coming program cycle. And Kentucky, on the other hand, dropped somewhat to 29th, weakened earlier this year when the Service Commission greatly scaled back Kentucky Power's program. In the Southwest, we continue to see strong performance from Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. Colorado, we should mention, this summer increased its utility efficiency targets to 1.6% of sales for the next program cycle, a roughly 25% increase over previous targets. Arizona, finishing at 17th, also continued to do very well, reporting the highest level of utility savings in the region, though utilities have proposed significant cuts to programs this year that we'll be keeping an eye on. Nevada also made progress in the wake of legislation passed last year to ramp up savings. And in response, NV Energy this year submitted a 3-year efficiency plan, significantly increasing efficiency program budgets for the coming years. And the state rose 5 positions to 20th place this year. So we'll also be looking to see how their stronger programs evolve for the future. And just quickly, in the Northwest, California, we mentioned this region has 3 of the top 10 states in the scorecard. Oregon and Washington both also continue to lead in the region with energy savings targets of around 1.5%. Oregon, I should mention, reported its highest electric savings levels this year. Both these states over the past year have also passed fairly robust executive orders to lead by example in strengthening efficiency within state agencies by laying out strategies to increase use of electric vehicles and spur construction of zero energy ready buildings. And we should also note that both California and Hawaii have established targets now to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2045, which will greatly benefit from complementary efforts to expand energy efficiency and decrease overall energy demand. And so finally, just a wrap-up slide regarding the types of strategies states should continue to push as they look to strengthen savings and reduce energy waste. Establishing an energy efficiency resource standard is, of course, important for driving utility savings, coupled with performance incentives for utilities. This can be a very strong motivator to spur savings in the utility sector. Updating building energy codes as well, but also taking steps to ensure enforcement of these codes through regularly measuring compliance and supporting training of code officials. And in terms of transportation, adopting stringent tailpipe emission standards and vehicle miles travel targets, which California has really been leading the way on amid the federal freeze on light duty standards, which I'm sure we'll all continue to watch closely. But overall, it was a really successful year at the state level, with a lot of states continuing to strengthen investment and efficiency and a lot of new trends promising to open up new possibilities for customer choice as well as for efficiency as well. So that really concludes the summary of the 2018 scorecard, but we have a couple links up here to direct you to some additional information. There's the report itself, but there are also some state one-pagers briefly describing how each state did, which I encourage you all to take a look at. And then also just a reminder for folks to please type your questions into the chat box, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. And with that, I'd like to introduce and thank Judith Judson for being here. Judith has served as Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources since 2015. She also chairs the Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Advisory Council and also represents Massachusetts on the boards of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Judith.
All right, thank you, Weston. And good morning to everyone on the webinar today. And can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just wanted to double check before I started. So on behalf of Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, and Secretary Beaton, it is a pleasure to participate in this webinar today and to celebrate the success of energy efficiency throughout the nation and as well here in Massachusetts. I want to say congratulations to the other top 5 states, to California and our neighbors in Rhode Island, Vermont, and Connecticut for your achievements and continued success in energy efficiency, and to all the states out there that are working on energy efficiency and continuing to lead and improve and engage in energy efficiency. It really does require a shared effort to create real change. I'd like to thank ACEEE for your continued focus on energy efficiency. Through this scorecard effort and other work, ACEEE provides a crucial role in raising awareness of the environmental, social, and economic benefits of state policies and initiatives, and helping us as state policymakers to learn from each other. Here in the Commonwealth, our aim is to create a clean, affordable, resilient energy future for our residents and businesses by developing a balanced and diversified energy portfolio that aligns with our greenhouse gas commitments and includes a continued focus on solar with a new solar incentive program called SMART. This year we procured 1,200 megawatts of new hydropower and 800 megawatts of offshore wind energy. We are continuing to integrate emerging technologies such as energy storage into our policies and programs, and of course, continuing our successful nation-leading energy efficiency programs. We are on track to reach our 2020 commitment to reduce our GHG emissions to 25% below 1990 levels, and are planning a goal for 2030 that keeps us on track to reduce emissions by at least 80% by 2050. We are honored and incredibly proud to lead the nation in energy efficiency, being ranked #1 in the nation for 8 years in a row. The Baker-Polito administration is committed to maintaining our leadership in reducing energy costs for Massachusetts consumers. In our Clean Energy and Climate Plan, energy efficiency is the single largest contributor to meeting our 2020 goals of a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The Commonwealth's commitment to energy efficiency cuts across ACEEE's criteria, including utilities, state and municipal operations, vehicles, building codes, and combined heat and power. And we have continued to renew our investment and update our policy in these areas as markets grow and new opportunities emerge. I do also want to thank our program administrators. We could not achieve this level of success without our Mass Save energy efficiency program administrators. And I want to thank them for the work they do each day to bring energy efficiency to our residents and businesses. In 2017 alone, our combined electric and gas program administrators delivered energy efficiency benefits worth over $2.6 billion with an investment of $740 million, showing that energy efficiency continues to be hugely cost-effective and beneficial. That level of annual investment results in a robust industry for energy efficiency services in our Commonwealth. In our most recent Clean Energy Jobs Report, it showed that we have 109,000 clean energy jobs in our state, with the majority being in energy efficiency. It also shows 4% job growth from last year, and this $11.4 billion sector now represents 2.3% of our total statewide economy. We are not resting on our laurels, however. We are working on development of our next 3-year energy efficiency plan for 2019 to 2021. We see this next plan as beginning an important pivot to new energy efficiency opportunities. Some of the innovative things that you can expect to see include a renewed focus on active peak demand reduction in both the summer and winter to mitigate customer bills and to work alongside the new Clean Peak standard that was passed by our legislature and signed by Governor Baker this summer. This includes incentivizing new technologies such as energy storage in our programs. We also will continue to lead on providing energy efficiency to low-income customers, but we are looking at ways to continue to improve how we serve moderate-income customers, renters, and non-English speaking homes and businesses. We are taking a holistic approach to energy savings by looking at ways to provide energy optimization for customers, including incentivizing fuel conversion to more efficient and affordable heating fuels. Our legislation specifically calls out strategic electrification and clean energy sources. And we are looking at new opportunities and incentives for passive house construction. to get deep energy savings both in high-rise and low-rise new construction. And we are working on implementing home energy scorecards. In addition to the work we're doing with our utilities, we've also invested in energy efficiency on a local level, with 72% of our population living in a green community. We have 210 towns and cities across the Commonwealth that are now designated green communities. And that program provides grants to cities and towns for a range of clean and efficient energy projects, including weatherization, lighting, and electric vehicle charging stations. To create a more sustainable state government operations, our Leading by Example program provides grants to state agencies, authorities, and public colleges and universities to reduce their overall environmental impacts of state government through clean energy and energy efficiency projects, including building energy intelligence and renewable generation sources. In closing, I know that many of you on this call have spent countless hours working to promote energy efficiency. I want to thank you for your efforts, and thank you to all of you here today who have actively participated in our Energy Efficiency Council and your dedication to strengthening this industry. Thank you again to ACEEE for recognizing the Commonwealth's achievements in energy efficiency, and to all of our partners, in particular our program administrators and the members of the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council who have made this possible. Massachusetts and the Baker-Polito administration looks forward to continuing and expanding our nation-leading energy efficiency efforts for years to come. So thank you.
Great, yeah, thanks so much, Commissioner Judson, for your insight there and the update from Massachusetts. With that, I'd also like to introduce Commissioner Andrew McAllister, who has served as Commissioner to the California Energy Commission since 2012. Andrew has worked across the world to develop renewable energy generation, energy efficiency investments, and energy management systems. Commissioner McAllister administered 2 of California's signature renewable energy programs, the California Solar Initiative and Self-Generation Incentive Program, and also developed and operated energy efficiency programs for utilities. He also currently serves on the board of directors for the National Association of State Energy Officials and the Alliance to Save Energy. And with that, I'll hand it over to Commissioner McAllister.
Well, great. Thank you very much. Can everyone hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And speaking on behalf of Governor Brown, I want to thank ACEEE certainly for its dogged advocacy for energy efficiency, and also acknowledge all of the states. I mean, in particular, Massachusetts. You know, it's good to have healthy competition between leading states looking in a similar direction and rowing towards similar waypoints. But I think all of the states deserve kudos really for working within their political context and their own particular environment to try to advance energy efficiency and clean energy policies. You know, it's not always easy, and we're lucky to have really serious, massive alignment between our electorate, our elected officials, our stakeholders, along the lines of energy efficiency, so that we really don't have to hesitate in pursuing aggressive clean energy policies in California. So I guess I want to just highlight California's role here first. We're the 5th largest economy in the world, and so we actually can move markets. And our gears may be somewhat larger, and our levers a bit more ponderous, and our processes a bit more involved with literally thousands of stakeholders. But what we do moves markets. Our economy alone as California certainly moves markets, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Together with the Pacific Coast Collaborative states, which includes Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, we even expand our footprint to move markets. And that alignment, I think, is really important, especially, as Steve said, with some lethargy at the federal level. So EE, or energy efficiency, has been, is, and will remain at the core of our efforts to confront climate change and inoculate our economy, rather, from climate change's impacts. 2 main areas where we do this: building and appliance efficiency standards. On the building standards front, as Steve mentioned, we did just adopt new triennial building standards that'll go into effect January of 2020 that do require solar for the first time. Now, the solar requirement has gotten a lot of the press, but I want to emphasize that energy efficiency is ever deeper in our building code, and all of this is cost effective for the buyers and residents of those homes. That is a fundamental requirement of passing these building standards, and it's just good sense for our economy to build it right the first time. It reduces our infrastructure investment going forward, reduces the overhead for our economy, and improves our nimbleness overall. So I think, seeing energy efficiency and strong building codes and appliance efficiency standards as an investment in the robustness and innovation of our economy is really the way to go. On appliance standards, we have adopted a number of assertive appliance standards, and again, those can move markets and often move up to the federal level over time, providing benefits for the rest of the country. Between our building standards and our appliance standards, over the last 44 years or so that we've been doing this, we have saved California ratepayers well over $100 billion, and overall our economy much more than that in the broader infrastructure savings. So that is just a good investment. Another major point I want to make is that energy efficiency is modernizing, and it must modernize. Just saving any old kilowatt hour, any old therm doesn't quite do it anymore. We have to, as Judith said, we have to consider the temporal impacts of energy efficiency, and we're doing that. Energy efficiency dovetails very well with grid responsiveness, with demand response, with advanced storage, with controls, and it's compatible with integrated resource planning. So as we move into and embrace the distributed energy world, we have to consider the distribution grid and its operation, and energy efficiency can and does contribute to that grid responsiveness. Again, it's a tool that we can use to adapt to a fully renewable grid at all scales, from the behind the meter scale all the way up to the neighborhood, to the load pocket, all the way up to the entire state and western grid. So again, energy efficiency is a key strategy for responding to these modern challenges of administering our electricity systems. Third major point I want to make is jobs. The recent study that was sponsored by NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officials, and the Energy Futures Institute just earlier this year indicates that California has about 310,000 energy efficiency jobs. And that is greater by far than the fossil fuel industry, and it's actually the largest sector of jobs in the energy economy as a whole. So energy efficiency really does, again, provide these core benefits to the foundations of our economy. Important for realizing these benefits and for doing better policy is data. And I want to emphasize that. We're doing a lot in data, in sort of pulling our regulatory environment into the digital age and using big data for good, to develop better policy, more targeted policy, to identify the opportunities at all scales, including the local level, for investments in our buildings to improve efficiency and optimize performance of our assets. We have thousands of stakeholders involved in this. And local governments are hungry for this kind of information, and the Energy Commission and our general energy policy apparatus is really has the authority and is in a great position to provide a lot of that data that allows climate planning to proceed at the local level in an optimal way. So fundamentally, our buildings are the platform for our response to climate solutions, or buildings are the platform for our climate solutions. Certainly, photovoltaics on the roof of our buildings. We're doing much of that in California. At all scales, we have over 20 gigawatts of solar, and I think about 7 gigawatts of wind, but much of that solar is at the small scale level, and about 7 gigawatts of it is behind the meter. So I think if you envision our buildings in the future, they're going to have, generation, say PV on the roof. They're going to have wonderful building shells. They're going to have great mechanical systems. They're going to have wonderful lighting. And so that all affects the energy footprint and the climate footprint of those buildings. But if we look a little more broadly, I think society at large appreciates many of the attributes those buildings will have. They'll be comfortable, they'll have good indoor air quality, they'll be quiet, they'll be a grid resource that will have some value, and all this will be seamless and largely behind the scenes. So these buildings will just be wonderful, automated, comfortable places to live and work. And we have intimate relationships with our buildings. We spend most of our time inside buildings of one shape or form. So it's very important to consider the larger quality of life implications of clean energy and energy efficiency specifically. If you imagine in 2045, we have an executive order that requires that our economy be fully decarbonized by that year. And if you think about what that implies, all the clean transportation, which I haven't even talked about, we have a goal of 5 million EVs by 2030 that the governor just raised from the previous goal, and we're on track to hit that. And if you think about all of our airsheds in the state being in compliance with federal ground level ozone requirements, for example, particulates, the health impacts, the broader societal impacts, the quality of life impacts of that are stunning. We haven't actually been in compliance with ground level ozone, I think, since we started measuring it, at least for the last 60 or 70 years. So that vision of the future that flows directly from our climate response, which is centered on energy efficiency and building performance, is something that we are actively marching towards. And all of our policies, which are really too numerous to go through on this call, are aligned towards that goal. And we have broad societal consensus on those points. So we certainly are not backing down on our pursuit of a clean energy future. We, along with Massachusetts and other leading states, believe that it's our duty to lead in this era. And really, the world is looking at us. Recently we hosted the Global Climate Action Summit, and the sense of positivity was just palpable, and the collaborative, the volunteerism, the collaborative mentality that everyone brought to that from across the globe was quite remarkable. And I think it gave us even more confidence that we're headed in the right direction, put some wind in everyone's sails, and created some collaborative institutions that will persist. And so in that spirit, I want to thank again ACEEE for the scorecard and for feeding this ecosystem and providing the kind of leadership and research and sustenance that helps us all do our jobs better. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Commissioner McAllister. Thank you to all of our speakers today. We're going to turn to the portion of the webinar where we take questions from you. So as a reminder, if you have a question and have not already done so, please type your question into the chat box. Please note that we are trying to prioritize media, so if you are media, please mark your question as such. All right, we'll begin with a question for Weston. Weston, what are the drivers for most improved states?
So the states we're seeing with the most, well, I should mention the scorecard. We look at 6 different policy areas. We look at utility policies, the transportation sector, building sector as well, and the utility sector and the building codes policy areas really account for probably 60% of the scorecard points. So the states that we're seeing improve the most are really the ones that are showing increased savings from utility programs. So it's the states that have energy efficiency resource standards in place are periodically, regularly increasing those targets. Because we find that EERS is probably one of the most successful ways for states to provide that policy framework to continually drive savings in the energy efficiency sector. And so I should note, that's really what was behind New Jersey's climb this year. They're being the latest state to adopt an energy efficiency resource standard. Also, I mentioned building policy. So states that are updating their building energy codes regularly to the latest ITC. So states like Connecticut this year, and Pennsylvania that updated to the 2015 ITCC. Those were the states that we were really seeing the most improvement.
Steve, can you say why a state might be interested in pursuing energy efficiency?
There are many reasons, and it will vary somewhat from state to state. Certainly, there are the direct impacts of energy savings and reducing energy bills for consumers and businesses. There are the emission reductions, whether it's greenhouse gases, but also the many other emissions, such as fine particulate emissions that come from power plants and cars that can contribute to a variety of health problems. There are economic development benefits. Energy efficiency tends to be relatively labor intensive, and most of the jobs are in-state, installing, maintaining things, as opposed to some other sectors where it's often out of state. So those are a few of the reasons why states might be interested, with the exact factors varying from state to state.
Thank you. The next question is also for Weston. Can you give more detail on trends for states that lost rankings this year, that fell in the rankings?
Sure. As I mentioned, the utility savings really account for a lot of the scorecard. So states that are taking action or passing legislation or other efforts to defund those programs or weaken them in some way are really the states that we're seeing losing points. So Iowa was a big example this year, passing legislation earlier this year that adopted a spending cap on efficiency programs. So early projections right now are that those programs are probably going to be decreased significantly over the next few years. They also changed their benefit cost test from the total resource cost test to the RIN test, which is more of a restrictive way of looking at the value of programs and doesn't really account for their full range of benefits. And then other states that we've seen periodically fall in the rankings were due to rating efficiency budgets to plug other areas of the state budget in the past. Connecticut did that last year. It doesn't really show up in the data for this year's scorecard, but could impact their ranking moving forward.
Thanks, Weston. The next question is for both Commissioner Judson and Commissioner McAllister. Where do we stand in the efficiency savings curve? Are we done with the lower hanging fruit and moving toward more difficult savings? How much potential is left for states like Massachusetts and California that have already done a lot?
This is Judith from Massachusetts. I'm happy to go first if that's okay with Commissioner McAllister. We have done a lot. It's absolutely true in Massachusetts, and we have touched many of our residents and businesses and put in what was available at the time in terms of energy efficiency. So it definitely requires continuing and looking at ways to improve and grow our programs. We are continuing to focus on how do we reach those that could be harder to reach, such as renters, non-English speaking families, those who we maybe haven't touched before with our programs. We're continuing to promote just broadly our programs so that all residents have access to them. But we're also looking at ways to evolve our programs. We're looking at now energy optimization and how do we think about the overall energy use and energy burden a consumer faces, be it a resident or a business. Our legislature, and signed by Governor Baker this summer, has allowed fuel switching, strategic electrification, ways to look at ways through fuel switching residents can save energy more broadly. We're also looking at focusing on those times when our emissions are highest, when our costs are highest, such as those peak demand periods. Are there things we can be doing to reduce peak demand, such as utilizing energy storage, so that we can shift when energy is used and produced? We're looking at implementing a clean peak standard to incentivize that and work with our efficiency programs. So, and then we also need to look at just continuing to do deeper energy savings. So passive house is something that we're looking at so that we can continue to go that next level in overall building savings. And then C&I, we think there still continues to be opportunities in lighting and more that we can do there. So we think there continues to be some fruit that's there, some lower hanging fruit. That's something where we can always continue to improve. But that said, I think we are looking at expanding, evolving, and in some ways what we're calling pivoting our programs so that we can continue to provide overall energy benefits for consumers.
So this is Andrew McAllister. I would certainly agree with everything that Judith just said. And just add, there are continuous technology developments that create new low-hanging fruit. If you think of every season, the same tree bears fruit at the same level. So you pick the low-hanging fruit one year, and you've got more the next. And that's kind of the nature of markets, is innovation. We live in an innovation-based economy, and the horizon or the envelope of possibility keeps getting larger. And so that creates new opportunities for very cost-effective savings. Energy efficiency remains the most cost-effective resource that we have, and we are increasingly treating energy efficiency as a supply in an integrated resource planning framework, and part of the impetus behind considering these temporal aspects of energy efficiency is in order to be able to compare it to other supply resources. A power plant, you have a knob you can turn to turn it up and down according to changing demand. Well, the same kinds of dynamics can be implemented with energy efficiency, with demand-side resources. And so batteries are part of that solution, but so is demand response, thermal storage, lots of different technologies that can help us be grid responsive and help our distribution networks remain resilient. And so energy efficiency plays a key role in that strategy because it really lays the foundation for all of these more advanced technologies that now are part of this demand-side ecosystem. So I want to just mention a couple other things. So again, I think strategic electrification is a very interesting trend that we're seeing, and we're doing a lot of work to characterize the potential for transitioning to heat pump technologies and others that have a net efficiency benefit. Certainly in a carbon-based policy environment, decarbonization goes very well with electrification as we clean up our overall supply in our grid. We fund a lot of research and development in California, about $150 million a year of energy efficiency related research in the state. And so that creates more opportunities. It identifies opportunities, it develops technologies, and it really helps accelerate the market development for efficiency. So that's a really key one, especially as we see some wavering in that regard at the federal government, even though so far the budgets haven't been cut radically, but every year that's a worry. The lighting revolution is something that's worth mentioning. LEDs have really transformed what we can do with lighting. There's really no trade-off with service. In fact, the service we get from lighting is better than it's ever been, and it uses less energy than it's ever used. So I think that remains an area with lots of, quote, low-hanging fruit. So I guess those are, well, one last thing I'd say is that the energy code vision that we have in California we mentioned the building code update for 2020 that we put in place that has solar included in it. It also has more aggressive energy efficiency. Solar really is just a very mature technology that is ripe for including in building codes, but it's not the only one that is on this path. And so as battery costs go lower, as demand responsiveness becomes more standardized and those technologies become more uniform, they can generate value for the homeowner that then opens the door for finding a cost effectiveness in those technologies that allows them to be incorporated into a mandatory code, or at least in the near term, a local stretch code. So buildings as a platform and the building code as sort of a petri dish for some of these new technologies on a voluntary basis for market development, and then once they get to a certain amount of scale and lower cost, then we can consider putting them into a mandatory building code. And so that's the sort of virtuous cycle that we have in the building code, and what's really from where it derives much of its power in terms of market transformation. So, this is a step. We're always making steps down a road towards a cleaner energy economy, and I think we're seeing much of that kind of innovation emerge in the ACEEE work to evaluate states each year.
Thank you. Picking up on Commissioner McAllister's remarks on beneficial electrification, we had several questions asking about how the report incorporates emissions efficiency, strategic electrification, beneficial electrification. Weston, can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, sure. So this is a question that repeatedly comes up. So currently, right now, the scorecard, we do not incorporate strategic electrification into the the savings metrics that we have. Of course, a lot of states, the main reason they're doing energy efficiency is to lower emissions. So that's of course, as you shift uses from fossil fuel generating onto the grid, that does increase load, which can work at cross purposes to an ERS. So that's something we're going to have to consider going forward, looking at ways to kind of parse out that and get into a little bit more granularity in those metrics. But so something that's not currently in the scorecard, but we'll be looking at refining as we go forward.
And I would just add, this is Steve Nadell, I would just add that ACEEE has done a bunch of work on beneficial electrification, whether it has to do with electric vehicles or also opportunities in buildings to switch. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. We've been trying to help identify where it makes the most sense.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Weston. Weston, you've talked about trends. What do you consider the most notable changes in state regulations and efforts in the past year?
So this past year, I'd say a couple of the states, New Jersey and Virginia, which are doing a lot better in the scorecard with their new plans to greatly increase investment and efficiency over the next few years. So, as well as potentially joining RGGI over the next few years. We mentioned strategic electrification. EV grid integration will be a trend we'll be looking more to increasingly, as well as net zero building energy codes. Other updates? Yeah, I'd say those were the major pieces. As well as several of the states that have been increasing their targets, like New York and Arkansas and Colorado.
Thanks, Weston. The next question is for Commissioner McAllister. In states like California and Hawaii that have recently committed to 100% renewables or carbon neutrality, how do you see efficiency playing into that aggressive effort?
Well, at a very high level, efficiency is fundamental. Efficiency reduces the scale of all the other solutions, right? It decreases the overall scale of the problem that we're trying to address. So if you think about, energy consumption, well, you have to provide all that energy at the right moment over each day, 8,760 hours out of the year. Well, if you lower that curve, particularly if you lower it at strategic moments like at peaks and seasonal peaks and places where you have a strong ramp in the supply curve, that reduces the scale and the investment required to solve the challenge of intermittent renewables. Say it reduces the amount of storage you need. It reduces the number of power plants that you might need. Presumably by then they'll be running on renewable natural gas if we have gas plants at that point. So I think energy efficiency is just a bedrock resource in any integrated resource planning approach, whether it's all renewable or not, that makes the rest of our problems much more manageable.
Thank you. We have only a few more minutes left in the webinar, but we do have more questions. If you have a question, a reminder to type it into the chat box, and we will try to get to it. Weston, the next question is for you. What about industrial efficiency efforts beyond combined heat and power? Does the scorecard measure any of those?
Yes, so we do. Those are all incorporated into the savings metrics within the utilities chapter. But yeah, it isn't because we set out a data request each year that reaches out to public utility commissions and the utilities to get a sense of how their programs are generating savings, and we consider the entire portfolio of residential, both commercial and industrial.
The next question is for Commissioner McAllister and relates to data. A couple of questions there. Is there any opposition to regulations about data? And considering in light of the move to big data, how do you address important tools like blockchain technology?
Well, great questions. So absolutely, the data, it's obviously in the news a lot, and sort of we take this responsibility very seriously. Now, the Energy Commission has had the authority to work with large amounts of data ever since we were formed back in the 70s, and that has been refreshed by the legislature very recently in the legislative session year before last. It definitely is the thing to do. We're the state with much of the big data innovation where much of that has happened, and the tools to use AI and machine learning and all the blockchain, the buzzwords that you hear, well, those are real things, and they actually really increase the power, the analytical power that we have to understand trends in the marketplace, consumption patterns, local trends, by jurisdiction, by building sector, by building vintage, all of these ways to slice and dice data that can elucidate where the most attractive opportunities for reducing our energy footprint lie. And so all of these tools, certainly blockchain and other tools that many of you know about are available to help in this endeavor. So, we have a lot of stakeholders in this discussion. We certainly, we have to go through regulatory processes to establish our data collection regime, and that gets participation from all the players that you might imagine, certainly from the utilities who invest, $1.5 billion in energy efficiency every year, and obviously want to invest that wisely. So I think we all see value in the ability to understand the energy consumption trends and sort of at a much more granular localized level so that we can do better policy and invest our resources appropriately. So I think on the one hand, yes, we understand the challenges for working in a big data environment today, but on the other hand, I think we have consensus really in California that these tools are powerful and can enable good policy and rational investment of our significant energy resources and energy efficiency dollars.
Thank you. The next question is for Weston. Weston, appliance standards don't seem to be a huge part for most states in terms of their focus on efficiency. Do we look at it in the scorecard, and how so?
Yeah, so this year we actually increased the potential number of achievable points a state could get from its appliance efficiency standards. Over the past couple of years, folks know there's been sort of a less activity on appliance standards at the federal level, which has created a greater role for states in promoting efficiency in the appliance standards policy area. So states like California and Vermont this year also passed some significant legislation to backstop efficiency standards for appliances. So we did add a point this year to account for that greater role that states are now playing.
And I would add, this is Steve, that a number of other states did consider legislation. We expect it to come up next year. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, Washington, I believe Oregon. So state activity in this area definitely increased recently.
This is Andrew McAllister. I just want to also, from California's perspective, appliances are arguably the largest wedge of savings that we have in California. And we have a process that is very open, that encourages participation. In fact, we have a relatively new standard for computers and monitors that is going to save massive amounts of energy, and that actually gained consensus across industry, environmentalists, and consumer advocates. So this can be done in a collaborative way that gets to a result that the industry in question can accept, as long as they know and understand that the regulation doesn't close off opportunity for them. In fact, it can open opportunity for them to improve
scorecard, and I encourage everyone to take a look at the report online to learn more about the scorecard, and we really look forward to continue tracking the exciting progress in policy innovation from states on energy efficiency. And thanks again for everyone's time.
Great. Thank you to Commissioner McAllister and Commissioner Judson for joining us. Please do check out acEEE.org to find out more about the state scorecard. Thank you.